You know what's a little better than a 5/5 with trample? A 6/6 with trample. I've heard that those are pretty good. Hello and welcome everybody. We are here for a fresh new league with some straight up Amulet. In the recent past, I've played some Hivemind Amulet, I've played some Garruk Relentless in Amulet, I've played some Reclaimer Amulet, and I think it's about high time that we return back to a basic quote-unquote list. And in fact, along that vein, I have some exciting news. I recently got my first 5-0 of the season off camera, sadly, with a list very similar to the one that you see on screen here. I had been testing it off of a list that you can find in the responses to this tweet here, if you want to see the list that this list was based off of, actually. But I faced against a couple of different, I would consider to be pretty meta decks, and was playing something similar to what we're going to be playing today, and I was able to get my first 5-0. And one of the things that I learned from this list is that Arasta seems to have quite a bit of potential here. And in addition to that, we also see that in a recent Modern Challenge, the Magic Online user Mistaken was able to place 7th in the Modern Challenge with the following Amulet list, which contains a few interesting choices. The first of which that I want to mention here being a couple copies of Mainboard Courser of Crewfix. This is a 3-mana 2/4, which is already good stats against the Lightning Bolt decks of the format. It's an enchantment creature, Centaur. You play with the top card of your library revealed, and you can play the top card of your library if it's a land card, which for us is obviously going to be a little more than half the time. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life. So, what's the deal with this card? Why am I interested by the presence of Courser in the main deck of this list? Well, first of all, this current meta is dominated by aggressive red decks like Blue-Red Prowess at the time being. It's probably the most popular deck in the format, maybe even better than the Heliod decks of the world. But also, there's a bit of a resurgence of control strategies. Esper has been around for a while, but there's also now a lot of Blue-Red Breach that's seeing play, and having another 3-mana threat that can accrue some value and get us some extra cards and a little bit of life buffer is definitely useful. So, I like the idea of having Courser as an additional intermediary threat here, as you guys know that I tend to like in my Amulet lists. A way to gain some life as well, and I just think it's an interesting inclusion. So we are going to be playing some Coursers, if not just one copy, in the main deck of the list that we're playing for today. But also, we'll see here that Mistaken was playing 2 Arastas. So Arasta is a 4-mana 3/5 reach creature, and whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, we get to make a 1/2 green spider with reach. And this has a couple of purposes. Firstly, against the prowess opponents of the world, a 4-mana 3/5 is already pretty decent on its own, able to block many of our opponent's threats, doesn't die to bolt. Maybe it dies to a block plus bolt, but at the same time, if our opponent wants to be casting things like lightning bolts and lava darts and whatever else they may have, serum visions, various instants and sorceries, we get a 1/2 reach spider for every single one that they cast. And even further, if we're playing against a control opponent, yet another threat is obviously something we're in the market for, is we need to try to slip things in underneath counter magic if we can, or run our opponent out of counter magic so our Titan will resolve. And Arasta is a good threat for that. For example, against the Blue-Red Breach deck, if they are trying to breach us and we slip an Arasta into play, not only can the 1/2 spiders with reach block an Emrakul and stop us from taking 15 and almost dying to bolt, pretty much. Instead, we can just block an Emrakul with one of these tokens or the Arasta itself, and if they cast anything into our Arasta before they breach us, that just means that we're going to have more useless permanents, 1/2 creatures to sacrifice to an Emrakul Annihilator trigger, meaning that we can very easily survive a breached out Emrakul, or even 2, as in the list that I just mentioned with the 5-0, I was able to survive not 1, but 2 through the breaches, putting an Emrakul into play, attacking an Annihilator 6ing, because I had both Arasta and Tireless Tracker in play, so I just blocked the Emrakul the first time with the Grazer, and the second time with a Spider, so I didn't take any damage, and sacrificed a bunch of tokens and a few irrelevant lands, and still ended up winning that game, despite our opponent breaching me twice. And that was quite the experience, and I'm looking to recreate that experience. At the time, I was only playing 1 Arasta, but Mistaken, of course, has arrived on 2 copies of Arasta, and I was impressed by Arasta, so I want to give this a shot. There are some other differences, but regardless, this is the list that we'll be playing today. So we do have 2 copies of Arasta. We have 1 mainboard Courser over the second Azusa that was in the list I showed you previously. We've got a second Radiant Fountain in the sideboard for our aggressive matchups. We've got 2 copies of Run Afoul. This is an interesting one that you may not be familiar with if you haven't been following Amulettitan content up to this point. And it's a 1-mana instant that makes an opponent sacrifice a creature with flying. So this could be a Emrakul that they just breach into play. This could be a Stormwing entity or a Sprite Dragon. There's various things that Run Afoul hits, and we're hoping to foul up our opponent's plans with Run Afoul. And we do see a couple copies of that one in the board. We still have our 3 trackers. With addition of 2 Arastas and a Courser, we should have plenty of threats to run our control opponents into the ground, make them go crazy. We have some answers to Blood Moon and Force of Vigor. We got all the Dismembers in the world. Of course, everything else is just the standard stuff you would expect in an Amulettitan list, minus maybe a reshuffler, as I'm not willing to play the long game of Emrakuling our opponent's board away, Valcutting it to death, and reshuffling and playing these long games against green-white Heliod. Maybe I could get some extra percentage points by doing that and trying to win that matchup that way, but honestly, I'd rather just hit the concede button. That's just me. And Mill is an ever-present menace to the Amulettitan deck, but it's not that common, and I don't feel the need to include a 1-of bullet in our sideboard for specifically that. Yeah, I don't really have much else to say. We're playing 4 Explorers again today, and that's exactly where I want to be. So I will see you guys for match 1 here. While we are waiting for our opponent to join us here, I do want to mention that I am very close to hitting 250 subscribers, the next milestone on my list, and when that occurs, I will have an Amulettitan sideboarding video for you guys to learn not only how to approach sideboarding with Amulet, but what the concepts are and how we come up with these sideboard plans. I'm not going to tell you exactly what cards to cut and bring in against X matchup, Y matchup. I'm going to tell you the philosophy behind those choices and empower you to know how to sideboard for yourself, even in matchups where you have never seen a sideboarding guide for. And that is my goal, to help you guys learn and to help learn myself. And if that's something you want to see, then hit that subscribe button, like this video, show me that you enjoy this content and support this content, and I will support you guys right back. And thank you to everyone who's already doing that. I appreciate you, and I see you, and yeah, I'll just leave that there. I will see you guys when we get an opponent. Alrighty, let's hop in here for the match. Just get an Amulet and Bounce Land hand for our opening 7 here. That's all we're asking. Playing against Nick the Face 86. There we go, Amulet and Bounce Land. All you gotta do is ask nicely, you know? It's just too easy, right? And here, we'll probably lead on Bog, so that next turn we can play the Amulet, play Colony Garden, and Graze Route a land if we want to, so we could go up a mana, maybe play a 3-drop if we draw it. I guess we could even play Amulet, Bounce Land, Graze Route, Bounce Land up to 3 mana, play a 3-drop, and then play maybe Explore afterwards, but regardless, I think it's going to be correct to lead on the Bog. If we just top deck a normal land that doesn't really do anything spectacular, then we'll be able to Grazer it into play. And that's kind of the idea. I suppose it also would be technically possible for us to play Amulet, Growth Chamber, pick up the Bog, and Explore, but I don't know if I want to do that when we have access to Amulet already, so playing against an Urza's Tower Expedition map deck. 3-drop? Asking nicely this time didn't quite work out. That is alright. So yeah, we'll lead the Amulet here. We'll play the Colony. I think we're going to just Grazer out the Valcut here and keep the Explorer in hand. The reason being, I apologize, there's some background noise. The reason being, if we top deck a second Amulet, then this Explorer will let us cast a Titan this upcoming turn, and otherwise we'll just potentially cycle it and see what happens. A Grazer would let us cast Titan if we top decked that. Azusa would let us cast Titan. Summoner's Pact would. There's Azusa. Alright, well, I guess we're doing the Titan thing, and we do have a main board Ghost Quarter here, which is something I like to play frequently, which means that we should be able to keep our opponent off of Tron here. So on the play, we seem to have navigated this game in a way that we can probably win from here. We only get 1 shot at a Ghost Quarter, so if our opponent has a way to reestablish Tron, we will be facing down active Tron, but perhaps we can kill our opponent with Dryad the turn after we do this, or something like that, or just have lethal damage with the Sunhome. We'll have to figure it out. But of course, we're going to be putting a Titan into play, attacking with it, and then getting on the attack trigger Ghost Quarter and something else. And that's our route to victory. I think I just want Bounce Land in hand here as well, so I guess if we pick up the Bounce Land, we'll have to have a green land in play so we can pay for our Pact. We can get Bounce Land in hand by picking up the Boros Garrison, I suppose. Or I guess on the attack we could get a bounce land and Ghost Quarter. I'm not sure if any of those is marginally better than the others. We're not really anticipating our Titan leaving play anyways, though, so we can get a bounce land on the attack if we just set up to be able to transmute for Dryad. But I guess we kind of need a bounce land in hand to do that. I think we're just going to be attacking, getting Ghost Quarter and maybe, like, Breeding Pool or something. No, I guess we want to be able to get Tolaria West, don't we? It's a bit of a awkward situation. I guess we just have to pick up the Bajuka Bog, as much as I dislike it. Because we need this double green in play to pay for our Summoner's Pact. That's just thinking way down the line. Our opponent might just concede to the Ghost Quarter, to be honest, but I wouldn't be surprised. So we'll get our Garrison and Hasteland here. There's the Garrison. Here's the Stronghold. And again, I think I'm inclined to just pick up the Garrison here, because I do want access to bounce land in hand. Although I guess if we have 2 land drops ready to go... It's not really about having land drops, though. I think it's more about being able to pick up Tolaria West and transmute it. Especially if we can do that before we attack with Titan. We'll guaranteedly have lethal, assuming our opponent doesn't have Dismember. So, like I said, doesn't really matter. Our opponent's just going to go ahead and concede to this. So, luckily they spared us having to do the thought. But I probably would have picked up the Garrison and then attacked and gotten Ghost Quarter and Tolaria West. And I think that would have been pretty much lethal. Especially with Azusa in play, we could play the Garrison, float some mana, pick up the Growth Chamber after having used it to pay for our Pact on upkeep, then play the Growth Chamber, float some mana, Growth Chamber, float some mana, pick up Tolaria West, transmute it. You know, something along those lines, letting us get Dryad into play before we attacked. So, not a big deal. And Tron is an interesting matchup for this list to sideboard for, because we don't really have a whole lot for it. We could bring in Force of Vigor, and I think we will. Mainly for hitting things that our opponent's Karn the Great Creator can find, but admittedly, that's about it. Courser's not going to be fantastic in this matchup, and neither is Bajuka Bog. Cavern is at least a turn 1 green source for Grazer, or an untapped source for Amulet as well, so I think those are about the only changes we want to make. We could maybe trim a Cavern to get a Tireless Tracker instead, but Tracker is not as good at winning the game as Primeval Titan, so I'll just go ahead and submit this way. It is feasible or reasonable to play a second Ghost Quarter in the 75, probably in the sideboard, for a matchup like this, but maybe we don't need it. We'll just turn 3 Titan our opponent again, no big deal. And yeah, this feels like a keep to me. We get to play turn 1 Grazer, bounce land, pick up the Vestige, turn 2 Dryad. And that's pretty good. We'll probably need to top deck another untapped source. We'll need to top deck a couple of untapped sources here, actually, because we can play turn 2 Dryad, bounce land, pick up the Vestige, and then if we top deck an untapped green source, we'll be able to cast Titan on turn 3. So our opponent's on Eldrazi Tron. Well, in that case, we definitely want the Tireless Trackers for sure. I didn't realize our opponent was playing this version. I thought for sure they were on Green Tron. But, I mean, I guess we didn't really see any stars or spheres or anything, so regardless, our hand's still decent against Eldrazi Tron. I think we want the Growth Chamber in play. It's unlikely our opponent's about to kill our bounce lands, and blue in play to transmute Tolaria West is important, so untap source. Not yet. We still have one more turn to top deck the untap source for a turn 3 Titan, assuming our opponent doesn't just Thought Knot away our Titan, in which case this Tolaria West is actually an excellent draw. I do think we want a Sanctuary to pick up the Vestige, though. That makes sense to me. It makes us a little further away from Val cutting our opponent, but this way, if we top deck an untapped source and our opponent doesn't have... Okay, well, they're going to dismember anyway, so it's no big deal. We'll pick up the Vestige. This also lets us transmute Tolaria West this upcoming turn by playing the Vestige and floating a blue, so there's that. Swing with Grazer for value, because why would we not? Look at that 0-3 getting in. I'm so proud. See the Thought Knot? Yep. We knew this was happening. No big deal. We've got a Tolaria West to transmute. I guess, even if they had another Thought Knot... If they have another Thought Knot, then having to pact in response wouldn't do anything. But if they have Chalice on 0, we could pact in response, pay for the pact, and then have Titan 2 turns from now. Interesting that we have the Breeding Pool as well, so we don't have to use Vestige here if we don't want to. I don't think that we want to. We'll just shock in the Breeding Pool, and we'll transmute. And if our opponent doesn't have a answer for our Summoner's Pact, then we have Titan next turn, thanks to the fact that we did top deck the untapped source finally. And if our opponent plays Chalice on 0 here, then I'm just going to pack in response, which is why I haven't yielded through this turn. Are they going to blow up our Grazer just to get in for an extra 4 points of damage? I probably will block the Thought Knot if they attack. Smasher. You know what's a little better than a 5/5 with trample? A 6/6 with trample. I've heard that those are pretty good. Yeah, we're definitely not taking the 4 that we don't need to here. Thank you, Grazer. You have done your job. We appreciate it. Your forces have supported us to the best of your ability, and that's all we really needed. Alright, we'll Pact. Get that Titan. Play that Vestige. Float a green, because green is the color that we want. Here's a Titan. And I guess we're just setting up Tolaria West. It might actually make sense to get a Sunhome here. Like Sunhome Tolaria West. We can float the mana. I guess we have to pay for our Pact. So we pay with the Breeding Pool, the Sanctuary, and the Crumbling Vestige. Float with Tolaria West and the Bounce Land. Play Garrison, pick up the Tolaria West, transmute it. Which seems pretty good. I think Tolaria West is a definite pickup here. Sunhome's fine. It might be better to try to set up Dryad, although that's worse against Dismember. So Tolaria West Valakut isn't that appealing to me. They could also have the 6 mana Ugin to minus on our Titan. Now, I guess they're one short of that. So they'd have to have Tron to answer our Titan here pretty much. Or Dismember, I suppose. Interesting. We could also get Ghost Quarter, so if they do have Tron, we can get rid of it a turn after. I don't know if that's relevant. Colony Garden as a chump blocker actually lets us not play into Dismember, so we can just take 5 from the Smasher, keep Titan in play. I actually like Colony Garden quite a bit here. I'm gonna go with Colony Garden. Cool. Colony already coming in clutch. One that I have not included for a while in Amulet, but I've found situations like this where the Colony Garden is just relevant enough. Also against Esper control, having extra random creatures to sacrifice as Kaya's Guile has been pretty amazing, to be honest. So, Karn the Great Creator, that is A-okay with me. I think our opponent's just basically dead to Dryad if they don't have another land here, so. No, I guess we still have to get the Dryad in play. If we top deck a Dryad, that's different, but. We don't have the Rex Sage, I don't think. Oh, this list is not even playing a Rex Sage. That's interesting. I had forgotten that particular choice was made. I don't think we need a Rex Sage here, though. Not yet, at least. Explore. That'll be good for getting extra Valakut triggers later. We could save transmuting Tolaria West for this upcoming turn. That would require us to expend a land drop for the turn, though. Our opponent's most likely just playing Bridge and passing this upcoming turn, unless they have Tron, in which case they might be able to answer Dryad. Even if they don't have a land, they could just play Bridge, hold up Dismember, and then if we go all in on Dryad with the Tolaria West, we get kind of punished, but I don't think we have another choice. They've already used one Dismember. I think it's probably correct to play out the Valakut. I don't know, though. I guess if we transmute Tolaria West right now, we're playing into a Thought Knot, but they're letting us attack with our Titan. Very strange situation. 3, 4, 5. We have Vesuva to copy Vestige for 5 mana, but that wouldn't let us play a Dryad, sadly. What are we going to get with our Titan attack? Because we're probably attacking Karn here. It's got to be the second Valakut and maybe like a fetch land. So that way if our opponent does have Dismember, we have something to get out of a Dryad anyways, like killing Karn or the Thought Knot to draw a card or something like that. Try to find one of those forces that we brought in. I guess that's fine. I'm pretty inclined to just go ahead and play out the Valakut here. Yeah, I think that's fine. Alright, we'll go to combat. We'll send this at the Great Creator. See if they want to put both creatures in front of our Titan. We'll get the second Valakut, and I guess just fetch land. Could be Ghost Quarter. We can actually Ghost Quarter ourselves for a Valakut trigger, but if we don't want to do that, Ghost Quarter our opponents to keep them off Tron instead, which is not unreasonable. I think that might be marginally better than the Heath. I might get Ghost Quarter instead. Just gives us more options. Probably not super relevant, but They block with the Smasher and the Thought Knot. Okay. We definitely want to kill the Thought Knot, I think, to draw the card. If we draw a Dryad right now, then it's actually pretty good for us. And that's fine. Let's draw our card from Thought Knot. Dryad? Explorer. Well, I'm going to cast one of these Explorers, because if we find Dryad, we don't. Fetch Land is actually pretty good here, though. So we'll play, I guess, just Vesuva copying a Valakut. And pass it back. We could explore into the Heath here also, but I don't necessarily see a reason to do that. Especially if we top deck a Dryad with the Explorer, that would be kind of disastrous. I wonder if our opponent even plays the bridge here. We have red and white in play to be able to haste our Titan. We'll have 2 land drops, so we can explore, play Garrison after floating, and transmute Tolari West, and then get Bounce Land and Slayer Stronghold, pick up the Stronghold, play it, and activate to haste our Titan, assuming we have enough mana to do that. So if they don't play bridge, we could potentially attack with a Titan here. Might not be a bad choice. And minus for Basilisk Collar. Very interesting. There's the Thought Knot. Well, I mean, they take our Explorer, but that's fine. We're going to get a ton of Valakut triggers here by transmuting this Tolari West, so we might even have a lethal. With double Valakut in play, we almost certainly have lethal, right? Alright, so our opponent has no mana, so let's just go ahead and do the lethal thing. So here's how it goes. We transmute this Tolari West to get a Summoner's Pact. Our Summoner's Pact will find us a Dryad. We will play that Dryad, and then immediately play Windswept Heath, and if our opponent, we'll crack the Windswept Heath and still have Ghost Quarter back up to be able to kill our opponent, so it's pretty elementary stuff here. So here's the Heath, and we'll save these targets upstairs. We'll always yes, always yes, always yes, always yield. And we will crack a fetch. There's the forest. And opponent's dead. Simple enough. Well, in case you could not tell, Eldrazi Tron is a good matchup for sure. And I guess because of the fact that we noticed that there's no Rex Sage in this list, I should probably mention that for a second. So the reason why I decided to trim the Rex Sage is I oftentimes felt like I was cutting Summoner's Pacts in the matchups where you want to pack for Rex Sage, specifically because of things like Chalice and because of Blood Moon and things like that, where if you cast a pact before they play the thing, especially like, okay, let me address this one at a time. So let's say you were to cast a Summoner's Pact, and then your opponent untaps and slams Blood Moon. The likelihood is you just die on the spot. So in matchups where you would potentially pack for Rex Sage to blow up a Blood Moon, you're already cutting some number of Summoner's Pacts just so you don't get stuck in that scenario where you have to cast a pact and let yourself die to Blood Moon. And those are pretty bad moments. Now maybe we shouldn't be cutting packs in those matchups as heavily as I usually do. I like to cut 1 or 2 Summoner's Packs in those matchups. Maybe I shouldn't be. But I felt like I wasn't very often packing for Rex Sage in those matchups. And in fact, Rex Sage was oftentimes a dead draw if they didn't have the Blood Moon, right? And if they had the Blood Moon, we usually lose anyways. And then in matchups like this, obviously we don't really need Rex Sage necessarily. I think that Eldrazi Tron is the biggest matchup where Rex Sage is actually helpful. But in matchups against, like, Utopia Sprawl decks, if they just lead on turn 1 Arbor Elf and then just ramp the easy way without having ever committed a Utopia Sprawl, then your Rex Sage is literally dead. It feels like a waste of a slot, I guess, is the best way to simplify it. And so I decided to test around with cutting the Rex Sage and relying on Force of Vigor instead. I believe my initial list had a couple copies of Mystical, whatever the 1-mana, I'll pull it up. Yeah, Mystic Repeal. I had initially been playing with a few copies of this card, the 1-mana instant that puts an enchantment on the bottom of its owner's library. And with both Mystic Repeals and Force of Vigors, I felt like the Rex Sage wasn't needed. Then I cut the Mystic Repeals and never put back the Rex Sage. But I also felt like the Rex Sage wouldn't really be missed that much. And so far, it hasn't hurt us yet. It stops me from bringing it in against, like, Burn and Heliod combo, where Rex Sage might actually just be a trap. But anyways, we'll see in the future. Maybe not including a Rex Sage is an oversight. So I'll let you guys know at the end of this league when we finish it out. But for now, I feel like we've had an exciting enough match. And I'll see you guys for the next one. Remember to like and subscribe if you want to see that video about sideboarding. And yeah, this is Red Face Menace. Signing off.